For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Holly Peel. I'm the director of Northstar Career Center, and I'm very excited that we're kicking off this year's more expanded and robust series of family education nights than we've had so far. We have just started in the 10th year of Northstar Career Center, where we offer vocational training opportunities for young people from the ages of 16 to 24. My esteemed colleague, Kristen Parson, is also with us. She serves as IEP and IAP liaison in our program. And we are very happy that you have joined us, as sharing accessible, free information to the public is a huge part of our mission to make the process of transition to adulthood as accessible as possible. We will be recording this session. At the end of the presentation, we will stop the recording that will be posted on the website. So if our live participants would like to hang around to the end, you will have the opportunity to turn on your cameras and microphones and chat with our wonderful speakers. So we have the first two of our incredible lineup of speakers for family education nights tonight. We have Dr. Kathy Matthews, who's here, and she's going to be sharing with us a little bit later. But here to kick off the evening is Judy Jackson from the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services. Judy has been working in the field of supported employment services and as an advocate for folks with disabilities for a very long time. And she is now the designated DARS counselor for Northstar Academy. So she is the person who will be working directly with our students, but she's also an incredibly rich font of information about DARS in general and the services they provide, and also about specific steps families can take if they have questions about how supported employment services work. I would like to welcome anyone who is joining us from outside the Commonwealth of Virginia, and thank you for being here. I do want to offer one disclaimer that a lot of these services and laws are very variable from state to state. So both Dr. Matthews and Ms. Jackson are going to be speaking about things as they stand in Virginia. So just be aware of that there might be some variation if you are joining us from another state. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jackson, who is going to present to us about pre-employment transition services and vocational rehabilitation.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, Holly and Kristen. This is always such a neat time to be able to start fresh at the beginning of a school year and get us all off to what we all hope is a good start. I want to start before I begin the PowerPoint presentation by giving you a little bit of history. We all love history, right? I hated it in school. But for the purposes of our discussion this evening, I think the history is a little bit important. So in 2014, in July of 2014, our wonderful legislators got together and said, you know, kids ages 14 to 22 who have a disability are really sort of getting the short end of the stick, and they're getting shortchanged because they're transition age kids, and they're, you know, by the time they're 14, in about 4 to 5 years or 7 years, depending upon how long kids who are in special education with a disability stay in school. But, you know, those years, whether it's 4 years or 7 years or even 8 years, up to their 22nd birthday. And in one state, it's up to their 26th birthday. But those years pass by really fast. And so the legislature said, you know, we need to be sure that we have mechanisms in place that are going to make sure that our students with disabilities have a way to transition. So out of those discussions came the Workforce Innovative Opportunities Act. And it's WIOA, yes. And that law said that all vocational rehabilitation agencies in the country, and that is firm across, and I understand that we may have some people from out of state, but this is something that is true all over the country. It said that all students between the ages of 14 and 22 who were in school and who have a disability, that these vocational rehabilitation dollars, 15% of the budget had to be spent on pre-employment transition services, wherein we get pre-ETS. And there were 5 components to that, and I'm not going to bore you with all of that, because once you sign up for services with your vocational rehabilitation counselor, in our case, DARS, whoever your DARS counselor is across the state. Once you sign up, they will talk to you about those 5 components and make sure that your student, your child, is getting those pre-employment transition services. But they said that 15% of the budget had to be spent on pre-employment transition services, and those 5 components had to be offered so that when students then graduated from high school, they would be ready to either enter into further schooling or employment or whatever, but those pre-employment transition services while in school and while they were a student with a disability, they would have those. And so I wanted to start there so that you kind of would have a little bit of context about what we're talking about when we talk about pre-ETs and all this alphabet soup, pre-ETs and VR and IPE and all of those kinds of things that we'll be talking about this evening. So, Miss Holly, if you will get us to the 3rd slide.
Sure.
And we're going to first talk about vocational rehabilitation, and you might hear it often referred to as VR, and it's just nothing more than vocational rehabilitation. But what that does is it assists individuals with disabilities, and that's the key here. The student has to have a disability, and it's got to be documented, but it assists them to prepare for, to enter into, and or to maintain employment. And the focus for vocational rehabilitation is just that, vocational being synonymous with employment, right? So do that. You don't have to participate. It's voluntary. You don't have to participate in VR. What is DARS? And so the Virginia Department on Aging and Rehabilitative Services is what DARS is. Okay, we can go to the next slide.
Got it.
And my thing is a little bit crazy here. So schools and DARS, so the schools where your students attend, and then DARS that we just talked about, we all share a common goal. And that common goal is that your students have successful employment outcomes. Because if your students are successful, then guess what? We're successful, right? And you as parents and grandparents and guardians and all, you're successful too. So it takes a village, right? We have federal regulations that require both schools and DARS to work together so that we can deliver those pre-employment or pre-ETS services within the educational setting. And that sort of touches a little bit on those 5 components that I was talking about that I just, I don't want to take our time to go through all of those, because your counselors will discuss those once you become clients of DARS. Pre-employment transition services, those things work in conjunction with the school's existing transition services, and they're based on the student's individual needs. Okay.
All right.
And then we can move along. So, basically what will happen is maybe Kristen or Holly will call me and say, I have a student that really needs summer work, and work-based learning experiences are one of those pre-ETS services that DARS can provide. And so we look at what the needs of the students are. What are pre-ETs? Well, we want to get an early start at developing employability skills so that we can then assist those students so that we can look at, it's not just going out there and getting that job, but first you got to know what you want to do. What do you like? What are the interests of that student? And then again, as I said earlier, this is just for students with a disability. Now, one interesting thing here is that a student can receive pre-ETS services, but they don't have to be a client of ours. We at DARS, we collaborate with students and families and schools and the community so that all of us together are those service providers. And I will entertain questions as we go along, if that's okay with our hosts, Holly and Kristen, unless you want to wait till the end, but whatever you guys think. I think you guys said to wait till the end because you wanted to not record them. Sorry.
No, that's okay. If anybody has questions as we go, they can always put those in the chat and we can address them as we go. Especially if they're general questions that would apply to everyone. And we just give our participants that special opportunity if they do choose to participate live as opposed to streaming it later, to chat with you directly.
All right, good enough. And so some of the things that are in place is that the students who are going to receive pre-ETS services, that they are receiving special education services, and they have something called an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, or they have a Section 504 plan, or they have a disability that's not served by any other means from the school. And I talked a little bit ago about you can provide documentation of the disability. That's going to always be really important for us at DARS, because one of the things that we do is look at the IEP so that we know the best way to serve your student. And pre-employment transitions can be provided to the kinds of students that we just mentioned. All right, we can go to the next one. So, how are students referred to pre-ETS? Are we at the same place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Oh,
we're in
good.
the same place. Yeah.
Just want to be sure. All right, so students can be referred for pre-ETS services by either the schools, and like I talked about, Holly, Kristen, any of your transition people at your schools can refer students to us. You yourselves as parents or guardians or any family member can refer, or another service provider. So Dr. Matthews can refer to us if she comes across a student or students, or if there's a school that she knows of that where there are students who could benefit from pre-ETS services. Anybody can refer, essentially. The schools in most cases have what we call the pre-ETS release form or a consent form. The schools will have that form, and they will either send it home with your student, or they'll contact you, or however best the person believes that it'll best work. Like Holly has her way of getting it done. Other transition coordinators have a way. I know we're working with some intensive support in virtual school, and we've got a system working out where everything goes to one person and then that person sends it on to us. It's another service provider. But once those forms are completed and all is done and the documentation of the disability is in, all of that will be turned over to whomever your DARS counselor is. And so your DARS counselor gets that, and then the DARS counselor will contact you as the parent if your child is still a minor, and we'll move on from there, and you all together will continue to make that journey through pre-ETS services. All right, let's go to the next one. Oops. There we go. All right, so One of those services is job exploration and counseling. That's one of those 5 components, and that's based on just experiences, and then post-secondary counseling. These are these 5 components that we're not going to get too involved in, but things like what, from school to work kinds of things, then workplace readiness training. That's something that's real important that I like to spend a lot of time when, especially with our younger students, I like to spend a lot of time doing soft skills. And then another one, the self-advocacy, is really important because it's important for our students to know how to advocate for themselves and to be able to articulate what it is that they want to be able to do. These 5 components are required. Those are things that must be done while a student is receiving pre-ETS services. All right, now we can go on to slide 9, I believe. Oops, there we go. All right. So some of the things that we like to think that we are doing a good job with, or we want to make sure that we're doing that, is we want to be able to foster motivation, and we want to make sure that we consider as many opportunities that your student is going to want to do, because like I said, this is all voluntary and students don't have to do this. Pre-ETS isn't necessary for your individual student. We just have to provide it. So we want to make sure that we're allowing situations where, or setting up situations where the student is motivated. We want to make sure that we're making sure that they've got good opportunities, and that as they're making their decisions, that they're informed and that they're not making decisions just willy-nilly. Kind of some of those examples, we want them to explore the world of work. We want, again, to explore interests and abilities. And one of the ways that happens is, particularly with your students with summer work experiences, we will set them up with an employment service organization or a skills builder kind of person that will do some situational assessments and try them out in different things. They'll investigate different kinds of careers, and then see if we can get some kind of summer work experience going for the student that summer. And sometimes some of those things the students do really well, and so they're asked to stay on the job and work there after school or on holidays, and different things like that as time goes along. Sometimes it's just a 3-week thing because sometimes our students are really busy. I had one student that graduated last year, and this particular student, we had to work really hard to find time. They really wanted to do a summer work experience, but they were going to go on a cruise with their grandparent, and they were graduating from high school, and they were going to do some really neat things just as a celebration. And so it was going to be really hard, but we were able, I think, to finally find a 3-week experience for them. But so we work really hard to make sure that we're providing the kinds of services that the students want and need, and yet also not take students out of their family life. One of the other things is exploration counseling. So those are just, sometimes students are just trying to really figure out, well, what is it? What do I like to do? What really is going to make me tick? So we as DARTH counselors, along with transition coordinators at the school, we all work together to see what it is that your student really wants to be able to do. And so we help in that exploration. All right. we can go to slide 10. If it'll pop up for me, there we go. We also, want to look at an educational approach that we want to provide to students so that they'll have the knowledge and the skills that are going to help them not only, figure out what kind of job they want to do, what kind of employment, but also with school experiences. Because all of those things working together turn into real life experiences and work activities and future careers, and all of those things make some differences. And sometimes when a student isn't really sure about what they want to do, but they think maybe they really want to work in a restaurant, so we might go do a work site tour so that they can learn about what's necessary and what the job skills are for that particular thing. Sometimes that we may have a student. I had a client that worked at the Children's Museum, and this particular client was doing exceptionally well. And so I had another client that really thought that that would be a fun thing. So we did a work site tour, and my student that had been working there for a while, my client, gave them a tour, told them everything they did, how they did it, what was expected. And the client that I had that wanted to do the work site tour decided, maybe not. And then I had another one. We have job shadowing, where they'll go and not just do a work site tour, but they'll shadow them, say for an afternoon or two. And I've had some students that have done that and really enjoyed it. Sometimes it's nothing more than just an informational interview. What does it mean to work at Chick-fil-A? What is it? What's involved in that? So we have students there. Sometimes we'll have, when I was working in Fredericksburg, we had employers come to our office, and we invited clients so that we sort of made the job fair come to them. And that sometimes works really well. And you see job fairs are there as well. But you can just kind of see the different examples on the screen. Okay, let's go to the next one. And I believe, whoops, this one must be work-based learning.
This one's counseling on opportunities for enrolling in post-secondary education.
Okay, so this is gaining an awareness.
Yep.
Okay. Some of my titles got hidden, and so they're not all here. So one of the things that we like to do in enrollment and counseling is we want the student to be able to gain an awareness of the wide range of career pathway options, and kind of what the labor market looks like, and what are the great things that come with having a job, and besides just making money, the gratification that you get when you're doing something you really like. And then of course the realities of what that involves. And so you can just kind of see some of the examples: academic and occupational counseling. What if you're going to go to school, what kind of courses do you have to take? What is the application process like? What's the admissions process? How does all that work? How do you get all of the financial stuff figured out? What's that process? I had some clients this summer that had done some work experiences, and they were doing their FAFSAs, and they found out that there was a whole lot of stuff they left off. Who are some of those resources and referrals that you can contact to get that kind of help? How do you set up campus visits and tours? All of those kinds of things that are important. I don't want to be taking up so much time. I feel like I'm
You're right on time.
okay.
And we can go ahead to the next slide, which is the
Okay.
workplace readiness
Right.
training side.
So, you know, we've essentially talked about workplace readiness. We want to just get students ready. We want to be able to make sure that they have the skills for an entry level position. We worked with some students this summer, and I always think that examples are so good because they bring it all back to practicality. But we had some students this summer that were able to get a Walgreens experience, and it took a while. The job coach that was doing that worked really hard to get that accomplished, but the students really benefited from it. And in the meantime, they were able to figure out what skills they needed, what was going to be expected, all of the soft skills that were necessary for that. So and to know what the employer needed from them. And it was just a good experience for them. And so workplace readiness, just anything that you can think of that leads you to know how to be ready for work. Those are the things that we're going to do. And you can see some examples here. Employer expectations, time management. Sometimes that's really hard. I had a client who worked at a grocery store, and the grocery store was 15 minutes by bike, but this particular client thought that they could leave 5 minutes before they had to be there, because after all, they didn't have to be at work till 3 o'clock. And they thought that they could leave 5 minutes before and didn't understand why they were let go, because they were late 4 days in a row, because they couldn't seem to figure out that it was going to take more than 5 minutes to get to work. You know, this job seeking and networking, sometimes that's really important. And we like to make sure that our students really get an understanding of that, because sometimes you're going to start at a job that's going to be an entry level job, but it's not really the job you want, but it's somewhere, it's a starting place, it's a foot in the door. And so it's important that our students learn those soft skills so that they can then learn to network. And hey, Holly, you know, I really want to be the head seamstress at whatever fabric store it is, Joann's Fabrics. And Holly said, well, I know so-and-so over at Joann's Fabrics, and yeah, I can, you know. And so I'm networking with her the whole time. Right now, all I'm doing is cutting material at Joann's Fabrics, but I really want to be the head seamstress because I really love to sew and I know how to do that. And so I'm going to use my network. I'm going to use Holly. I'm going to use Kristen. I'm going to use Dr. Matthews. I'm going to use all the people that I know. And so it's important to teach our students those kinds of things. Those are things that you really don't ever really think about. And sometimes this next one, employment, application, and writing skills, sometimes that's important depending upon the kind of job. Interviewing skills, that's so critical. Teaching our students how to interview, and especially our students with disabilities, because they don't, a lot of times there's a whole lot that is expected. And it's not that they can't meet those expectations by any stretch of the imagination, but we have to make sure that we work with them and that we teach students how to really hone in on those interviewing skills and do really, really great things and bring out. We have a client right now that's trying to get a job, and bless their heart, they try so hard, but they don't know, they haven't figured out how to sell themselves. And we've probably worked with this client probably 7 or 8 hours in different stretches of time. And that's the biggest deal. They have wonderful skills. They just don't know how to sell themselves. You can see some of these other things, job retention, workforce, but I want to make sure that we leave good time.
We'll go to the next slide, which is instruction and self-advocacy.
I can't say enough about this. I could probably talk 2 or 3 hours just on this. I think this is so important. And as a person with a disability myself, being able to advocate, being able to ask for what you need and do it in an appropriate way, with appropriate skill is so critical. One of the things that I do at the schools that I have is I usually do this particular component at least twice, once at the beginning of the year and once at the end of the year, because at the end of the year, we're getting ready for summer work experiences. And so I want our students to really know, I know this situational assessment was good and I know it's what you really wanted me to do, but I don't like putting flowers together. I don't like the smell of flowers. I don't like to work around flowers. And so, they need to be able to advocate rather than, these flowers, they stink. I can't stand them. I don't know why you made me do this. That's not the most appropriate way to say, I really don't want to do this. And so there's good ways, as all of us know, how to get what we want. And so advocacy is just really critical. And you can kind of look at that slide and see kind of the examples of, what works for advocacy and how to advocate and the kinds of things that you would advocate. One of the things too is that's really important. One of these examples is understanding rights and responsibilities. And sometimes our students don't understand that they have rights and that other people have a responsibility to treat them with dignity and with respect. And I think it's important that we teach our students to advocate properly for that. And like I said, I just can't say enough about the importance of self-advocacy because it's critical. I can move to the next one.
This is the summary slide of pre-employment transition services.
So essentially, just in summary, pre-employment transition services are provided through a vocational rehabilitation program. All voc rehab programs are required to spend 15% of their budgets on pre-employment transition services. There are 5 components, and we discussed several of them. And again, it's a voluntary thing. For those of you that are at Northstar, Holly will be most likely the person that has the consent form and will be getting the IEPs and sending those to me. And I will be the one that will be contacting you and getting you set up and getting you in our system. And then I will be coming out once a quarter, sorry. Not once a quarter. That's not true. I've just made Holly panic, but not really. Once a quarter, long day. I'll be coming out, I believe twice a month, and we'll be working with your students in these different areas. I'll be bringing presentations. I may bring other people from our staff at my office that will be doing different presentations that will comprise one of these 5 components. The students it's very interactive, and we're going to have a really great year. Now, the other thing I'll say just quickly, and the other side of what we do when your students primarily are seniors, and we can certainly do it before we've had clients, but we can move them as long as they're a student with a disability. They can receive pre-ETS services up to age 22, I believe. So but let's say that your student wants to still be in school. We had a student at Northstar that was a senior last year, and this particular student moved into the voc rehab program, but still received pre-ET services. So we set that student up on what we call the VR side of things. And that's really not much for you to have to deal with, except that you sign a different application for us at DARS, and the paperwork is different, and that's basically all that it is. And then we develop an individualized plan for employment, and we don't do that as pre-ETS students. We don't have to develop a plan. We can just still provide those services. And again, those are just internal things. But once you become a vocational rehabilitation client, and if your child is still a student, we can still provide pre-ETS. We can still do all of those things. There are just additional kinds of things, like we have to, once you become VR, we have to determine eligibility, which in most cases is not a problem because we already have the IEP or the other 504 documentation that's going to make you eligible to receive services. If your child is receiving Social Security, SSI, if they're receiving that, or if you're getting SNAP or TANF, any of those kinds of things, your student is eligible for services, and we can talk about those kinds of things. And then once your student graduates from high school, if they're not on a VR caseload, once they're graduated, we definitely want to put them on a VR caseload because we want to look at employment, or we want to look and see what they want to do about school to see if it's something that we can support. Everything is done on a case-by-case basis. It's individualized. There's not a cookie cutter mold at all. We look at each case individually, and we want to make sure that we're serving your student in the best way that's going to meet their needs. Because as I said at the beginning of this, if your student is successful, then we're successful. And our goal is to make sure that we're raising responsible adults and citizens, and that they're able to have the kind of job that they want so that they can be productive members of society.
All right.
So
thank you very much.
Oh, right at 40 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Judy. I'm going to just take a pause for a moment and see if there are any questions that you'd like to post in the chat that we can address before we transition. I've got a couple of points of clarification, Judy, because you hit the nail on the head with some of the things. I want to give all of our Northstar folks a heads up that the first pre-ETS day here at Northstar will be Monday. So everyone at Northstar who has a student 14 or older should be in one of the following two categories. Either we already have you on the pre-ETS caseload, or you have 2 emails in your inbox from me with that form that Judy requested. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to schedule a time and talk to you about how this might pertain to your family specifically. If you're not in one of those 2 categories, please reach out to me and let me know so that I can clear that up and make sure that we have addressed the situation. Again, these are voluntary. No one has to participate in this, but at a minimum, you should have the paper in hand so that you can make that choice. I wanted to offer one more point of clarification. As a private school, about 50% of our students are here not with an IEP or a 504, they have an IAP, and that is something that as well DARS will accept. Yes. So when I get that pre-ETS document, I send that over to Judy with those documents. I make sure your Northstar case manager is looped in so that everybody's informed of where we are in the process, and then we move on. All right. Ms. Carson, did you want to speak before we transitioned over to working with Dr. Matthews?
No, I'm okay. I just thank you, Judy, so much for being with us. I just wanted to go ahead and pull my video back up in case there were any questions in the chat, and to help kind of facilitate that. So if anyone does think of any questions for Judy as we continue on into the next presentation, you can still put those in the chat. And then as Holly already mentioned, we'll have an opportunity at the end of both speakers to address those.
I just got a question in the chat that's specific to one student, but I'm going to answer it generally. So for Northstar specifically, we have about 60 students that participate in pre-ETS. So what I do when I get that final list is I break them up into groups based on the way we group everything here at Northstar. So that's going to be with consideration for their peers, for their learning needs, for their presentation styles, and all of those things, kind of the way we break up students into advisories. It's a very similar grouping. And then those are scheduled throughout the day. Usually we start about 8 o'clock and we wrap up maybe by the end of 5th period, which is right at 1:30. I won't know which block each student will be in probably until Friday, because those forms happily are still rolling in, and that changes my groupings. And of course, like everything at Northstar, making sure each student is in the most appropriate group so that they can access all of these activities in the best way possible is critical. So that will come home. We will let students know hopefully by Friday afternoon, and then we remind them on Monday that they will spend 1 block in the library doing that, and their teacher for that block will help them remember that it's time for them to go to participate in that group that day. And that will happen roughly once a month. And we just recently confirmed those dates, so keep an eye on the Navigator News. I will be listing all of the dates for the year shortly, now that we've got them down on the calendar. So that was a great question.
We did.
And
Did
then
you see
another
this one?
question was, who do you need to contact to start the process of a job shadowing or any of those kinds of activities? You would contact who that you said you have been assigned a caseworker. It's the caseworker you would meet with. So you would reach out to that caseworker to set up a meeting and to see how you can schedule some of those activities that
Are they already a DARS client?
Yes, it says they completed the DARS consent, they've been assigned a caseworker. Who do they need to contact to start the education process of job shadowing? So that would be to contact their assigned caseworker, correct?
Are they, yes. Is it somebody in our Richmond office, or are you Chesterfield?
Or it could be somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting we're doing
Right.
statewide.
Yeah, so it would be, since you've been assigned a caseworker, that's the person you would reach out to, and you are welcome to follow up with me afterwards if there's a more specific question. And Ms. Jackson's contact information will also be posted when we send you all the PowerPoints tomorrow, so that you are welcome to reach out to her. She can help route you to the correct office. Let's see. Great question. Somebody lives in Richmond in the year, but goes elsewhere during the summer. Is there somebody they can work with at their summer location? The other thing I'd like to make a point of while we're addressing this question is sometimes we call them summer work experiences, but they can actually happen year round. So we do have a few folks who attend Northstar specifically, I know, who are elsewhere during the summer, and they have opportunities through the school year, maybe on the weekends or in the evenings or during a different vacation. And I think that the summer location issue would be limited by if it's sort of within the same district or state, just from in terms of managing billing and so forth. Judy, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, it gets a little tricky if they're going to go away to the summer, because it takes a while to get everything set up. So with summer work experiences, we usually set the student up with a job coach, and that job coach does an intake, and then they have to do situational assessments. And, by the time all that happens, summer's over. So it makes it a little bit interesting, to say the least, to try to do something where you're in Richmond in the year and then somewhere else in the summer. So I'm not going to say that it can't happen, but the likelihood is going to be interesting at best to try to make all of the pieces fall together.
The other thing to consider, depending on how remote that secondary location is that these summer experiences are a great way to get to know the employment service organizations in our area who work with our students when they do transition to VR and move into the full-time working world. Those are the same agencies that provide skills trainers who work with students during these summer work experiences. And I think I'm preaching to the choir when I say those relationships are critical to making this successful. You want the professional who's working with your student or with you to really know that person as an individual and understand those strengths and understand the communication support needs. So one of the things that can be advantageous about one of these work experiences is the opportunity to build a relationship with that service provider, who a year or two down the line might be the service provider and support agency that would provide a job coach or an employment specialist, same thing, when that person transitions to working in employment. Having that relationship in place can really be a springboard for success, especially because, you know, a lot of us experience anxiety when we're moving into something as uncertain as employment. So that's something to think about as well. If the long-term employment goal is in the summer location, that could be a great solution. If not, it might be worth making it work here locally, so that then that relationship with that service provider can start to develop. All right, well, Judy, you've given us lots and lots of information to think about. We actually have two PowerPoints that we're going to post. Judy did such a great job of explaining vocational rehabilitation. We didn't even need to jump over to that PowerPoint, but it will be available. I know this is a lot of information to process, so you all will receive that by email, and also it will be posted on our website by Friday. You go to Career Center and go to the Transition to Adulthood page. So thank you, Judy. I'm going to transition here just for a moment and invite Dr.
And I think, Holly, you're muted.
I just muted myself. Yep. I was trying to do something else. That's what happens when we talk and click at the same time. All right. That was better. Thank you, Judy. Dr. Matthews, we're so happy to have you here. Dr. Matthews graduated from Columbia University as an ABA therapist and has worked many places, New York, New Jersey, Virginia. For a while was the director of the Faison Center, because I think many people are familiar with that, and then has served in many, many capacities as an advisor, service provider, and support person for families, and is now the clinical director or the lead clinician at the Special Abilities Network. And we are delighted to have her with us. She has been a leader in this region for some time, advising and supporting families who are traveling this journey of raising a young person with a disability. So I'm going to hand it over to her, and she is going to speak about some of the most challenging parts of accessing services. So I'm happy that she is going to be in this role, and I look forward to learning more about waiver services and disability life planning.
Great. Thanks, Holly. I appreciate it. And Judy, I really appreciated what you said as well. I definitely refer lots of clients to Northstar. Northstar is a true gift here in Virginia. And the Career Center is something I've just never seen before. I appreciate it so much, and it is truly effective. So I've been excited to see the families I support go through that program, and just all that you all are doing, and that collaboration you discussed and coordination. It's so important that we come together to help our families and the individuals that we're here to support. So I'm going to talk about two things tonight. One is quickly disability life planning, and then I'm also going to talk about waivers, the Medicaid waiver program. So disability life planning, there's a little QR code there in the corner that would take you to Special Abilities Network if you'd like to know more about our organization. So why am I on a mission? Why do I care about this? These are my two kiddos, little Andy there in the orange and Ethan over there. Both of my kiddos have disabilities, and I'm a mom. I'm worried, right? So as Holly mentioned, I spent a long time working in nonprofits, providing services, doing a lot of different work in special education. And when I had my own kiddos with disabilities too, I became very aware of a huge hole in service coordination, which is life planning, which is the what do you do when you're not here to help your kids anymore problem. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how for the last 3 years, I've been working to create a business and a mechanism to provide disability life planning through a really easy process. Because the reason we don't get it done as families is because it's very hard to get started, and it's super, super overwhelming. So I'm working on that. I apologize, you might hear my dogs barking. Hopefully you don't. I've started talking, so they're barking. So the mission of Special Abilities Network is to give every family a special needs plan if they want one. We know that families, parents, caregivers, we are the ones providing support to individuals with disabilities, and we are providing unpaid care, which means at the moment that I am no longer here and able to support my loved ones, someone will have to be paid, most likely, to come in and provide that support. And so how do you get started, right? How do you think about how to address that need? Well, we've really simplified this into a 3-step process, and that is about understanding the funding that your loved one is going to need, understanding what legal protections are going to need to be there to support them, and then the actual support strategies that they require. So I'm just going to talk about those 3 areas briefly, and I know there's a lot of words on this slide, and I'm sorry about that. But as sitting down thinking about what happens when I'm no longer here, is the first step to take is to really think about the cost of care. So for example, my kiddo Ethan, who has autism and ADHD, he's 11 right now. I have every expectation that he's going to work at some level, that he is going to live semi-independently. He's really, really doing well, but I think someone's going to have to keep their eye on him, continue to provide support, help him problem solve, troubleshoot things. And therefore I need to, this is why I'm doing that kind of planning. So first I need to understand his daily cost of care. What does it cost to take care of Ethan? What does it cost when I'm not here? What does it cost annually? His therapies, his food, his iPad, his robotics, all those different things that he enjoys. And once I have that number, I can think about, okay, well, what resources do I have? Am I able to leave some of my retirement savings behind to him, maybe in a special needs trust? Am I able to contribute to an ABLE account that he could access? Is he going to be able to get supplemental Social Security income? What are the tools that I can put in to support those needs of his financially? And so it's really a calculation and an assessment you can do, and a formula and an analysis you can go through to figure out, have I met that cost of care? So that to me is extremely helpful. And the reason why that comes first is because that will inform what you need to do legally and what you need to do therapeutically. And I know that might sound strange, but on the legal side, I just mentioned a special needs trust. Since my son is on the Medicaid waiver wait list, and it is possible he's going to need public benefits in his future, I have to make sure any resources I may leave behind to him don't go directly to him, because then he would have those assets and that would kick him out of these public benefit programs. And I just don't know what he's going to need. So building and creating a special needs trust and thinking about how to fund that in the future is a way I can protect him and make sure he has some different ways to get his needs met. I also may end up having to think about power of attorney, or something like a micro board, which is a really awesome network of support that you can build for an individual. So those are all legal strategies. And then support strategies. What happens if I'm not here? Like, I know why and how Ethan needs to eat his breakfast in the morning. And like, if it doesn't happen that way, it causes a lot more problems that morning, and could cause us to be late to school, and kind of, pose a lot of challenges for the rest of the day. So by providing a care plan, somebody stepping into my role suddenly would kind of have a set of instructions, like, this is all the stuff for Ethan. This is, how we do the morning routine. This is, these are his doctors. This is how we're going to meet his needs. And so that's so very important. The other part of a support strategy is advocacy. My pushing, to get that Medicaid waiver, the pushing that I'm doing with his team at his school. So all of that falls into the support strategy. And it also, because we know legally what's in place and the funding needs, that can help inform what we're eligible to receive on the support side as well. So that's kind of why we go in that order. We are providing to Northstar families a disability life planning clinic. And so this QR code would take you to the sign up portal, but these are 30-minute sessions. And you might be thinking, okay, Kathy, like, there's no way I'm going to create a plan in 30 minutes. But the idea is to get you started. So many of us as parents, we don't know how to actually get started, how to answer those questions. Where's the money? What's an ABLE account? What's a Medicaid waiver? What am I eligible to receive? And so the idea of the 30-minute session is to help us get you started and put you on a track for that 3-step process. So you fill those 3 buckets that I just described to you. So we invite you to join us, help get started, and we're super excited about being able to support Northstar in this way. So I'm going to jump over to waivers and talk about them. So a Medicaid waiver, by definition, that term waiver next to Medicaid is about waiving the normal requirements. That's why it's called a Medicaid waiver. And so the reason why it exists and was put into place, now waivers are available nationally, but they're administered at the state level. So every state is a little bit different. I'm familiar with a lot of different states because we have clients across the country, but I'm going to speak specifically to Virginia here. But a Medicaid waiver, it's all about services. So when we go into adulthood, for folks that need support, we often think of Social Security as our room and board. And the Medicaid waiver and Medicaid services as more of what I just said, the services, the therapies, the treatments, the things like that that need to happen. It's a public benefit option, the Medicaid waiver, that was designed because disability is lifelong. And so when we're sitting here and I'm thinking of my 11-year-old child and the long life he has ahead of him, I can put a ton of money in a piggy bank and keep doing that, but at the end of the day, it really might not be enough to support him. And so that the problem that Medicaid waivers are here to solve is that foreverness. I'm kind of making up a word. This disability is there. It's there for a long time. It's there for life. And so we may run out of resources as families to be able to provide all the support that's needed. So that's one reason to go ahead and apply for Medicaid waivers, go through the eligibility process and see if you're given one. I hope the day they call my name and tell me Ethan has gotten his, that would be great if I could say, you know what, we're good. I actually think we're going to be okay. Trust me, there's someone behind me waiting in line to get it. So there's a long wait list for these Medicaid waivers. So it's good to apply. You don't know when you're going to get it, and I'll talk more about that. The other bit to keep in mind with a Medicaid waiver is that there are a lot of providers. Sometimes when you're not in the Medicaid waiver world and you're not working on the public benefits, you don't realize how many providers and agencies are out there. There are lots of counselors, therapists, in-home providers, therapeutic consultation, personal assistants, all kinds of stuff out there that is specific to Medicaid and the Medicaid waiver. It is not available outside of that. So sometimes you'll call these agencies and they only accept Medicaid or the Medicaid waiver. And so the other reason to apply for waiver is it can really open up services that are not available to you otherwise, or that you might have to pay, your insurance may or may not, your private insurance may not cover it. I know sometimes we pride ourselves on having private insurance, and I have this great insurance, but sometimes it won't cover some of those specialized things. So I'm certainly not saying you have to do this or you have to do that. I'm just trying to inform you that there are a lot of services that are only applicable to those Medicaid holders or Medicaid waiver holders that are worth considering if you're having trouble finding services. So it's a good thing to look into for that reason. I'm going to talk about this. The reason why I'm showing this slide is it's from My Life, My Community, which is our state's website here in Virginia for Medicaid waiver information. However, as someone who talks to a lot of Medicaid folks here and Medicaid waiver professionals here in Virginia, typically when you're applying for a waiver, it's very general. So I wanted to put some information that's available on state websites up here, because this is what you're going to see if you're that midnight mom doing Google searches. You're going to see this kind of information, so I want to cover it. But I also want to say the process is a bit general. So let me tell you what I'm talking about. So on this website, it's talking about what waivers can do. They provide all kinds of things, as I mentioned. There are tons of services, from in-home things, community-based things, medical things. It is quite an array of services. And like I said, there are lots of providers that are linked to those services. On the website, it talks about 3 different waivers, one of them being building independence, which is really meant for that person who's transitioning to adulthood. Gosh, if we just provided a little bit of help, they could get there. This is an underutilized waiver in Virginia. And I will say, in talking with state folks even recently, there's a lot of confusion about how to use this and who's eligible. And so there's some work to be done there. But I'm going to talk to you about generally how to get information about waivers, because you will have to contact your local community services board. So I know I'm throwing like a lot of information out there, so I'm going to keep trying to like kind of put it out there, and then let me explain it a little bit. But the family and individual supports waiver and the community living waiver are where there's really actually more of a general approach. So if you go to your local community services board here in Virginia, you're really going to say, hey, I want to apply for the developmental disability waiver. It used to be that you really kind of had to pick, which waiver do I want? Which waiver should I apply for? But it's usually a much more general process now, where you just say, hey, hi, Community Services Board, I'm here to apply for the developmental disability waiver, and they have a process to go through. You might be thinking, who's my Community Services Board? What are you talking about? Every locality here in Virginia has a local community services board. Sometimes they're really specific, like the Henrico County Community Services Board. Sometimes they have a name that's a little bit different. So for example, I live in Powhatan, and mine is the Powhatan Goochland, or might be the Goochland Powhatan CSB. There's also Northwestern Community Services Board, which serves Winchester. So it's not called the Winchester Community Services Board. But that's how things work here in Virginia. In other states, there's a similar mechanism at the local level to administer a waiver. So if you are out of state, you'll want to look for whether it's a county or parish, wherever it is that you are, there's some sort of local administrator for that waiver. So here in Virginia, the building independence is a standalone waiver, as I said, to get over that transition. It's meant to provide some support to individuals who are living, becoming adults, living on their own, and moving in that direction. And kind of stay tuned, because the state is, as I understand it, is working to clarify that a little bit more. There's some concern that it's underutilized, which sometimes points to, people don't know how to use this. And the family individual supports waiver and community living waiver, I would just encourage you to be more general when you call your CSB, to just say, I'd like to apply for the developmental disability waiver. You might be listening to me going, Kathy, I don't need a waiver. We have good jobs, my child is working, or maybe you're an individual that's working and you're thinking, why would I need this? I feel pretty set. I should be able to take care of myself. Again, I just want to point out, I'm not encouraging you, telling you to go get a waiver, telling you not to go get a waiver. But I do think it's important to keep in mind that those waivers offer a lot of services that you can't get elsewhere. They're very different kinds of services. Also, just keep in mind lifelong care. I think about, again, how young my kiddos are. Many of my clients, for example, the ones at Northstar that are in the Career Center or in the high school program, it's hard to think about what are they going to need when they're 50 or 60. The wait list for the waiver, they're often decades long. I mean, they like to say, 5 to 6 years. I've seen it go on for a very, very long time. And again, wouldn't that be awesome if they call your name and you don't need it? But I encourage you to explore this and talk to your local community services board and see if this is appropriate for you and your family. So what's going to happen again for the waiver, the way that it works, once you're going in to get the waiver, because you might be thinking, okay, I'm going to call, I'm going to say I need this. What do I need it for? What the waiver can do is it could have somebody coming into your home and assisting you. I have an individual in the Hampton area, and he has somebody coming to his house, helping him to study for his driver's education exam. He's a young adult. He's not driving yet. It's something he'd like to do, and that's part of his goals. And he's got somebody coming into the home to help him with a variety of things, but including working toward that very important goal of his that's going to help him to be more independent. I have individuals that get involved in community engagement, where someone comes to where they live and takes them, out into the community to do enriching activities. I have other folks on the waiver that go to day support programs, and they spend their days in programs that go out in the community, that do things on site. I have folks right now that get what's called therapeutic consultation. So that's an individual who's having some behavior challenges, and someone can come into the home or into their day support or wherever it is that they are, and help provide some guidance to the staff, to the team, and to that individual on more positive pro-social behaviors. So it's really providing a range. A waiver can also assist with living services. So, you know, back in the day when I was growing up a long time ago, you either lived at home or you lived in a group home. It's really not that way anymore. There are a lot more residential options. A waiver could support someone to be in your home, providing you support. It could provide a sponsor where you would be living with someone who could provide your care. It can provide supported living where, kind of like I think about Ethan potentially, where he's living somewhere and someone's kind of got their eye and they're checking on him, and you know, he has goals related to what he may need support with. So there's really a nice array there, and those things are all Medicaid waiver specific. So again, those are some great things that the waiver provides. If you decide to pursue that, again, you're going to contact your community services board. I'm always happy to help folks look for those. So you'll see my contact information, and feel free to say, hey, here's where I live. Like, where is this? Happy to point you in that direction. You're going to ask for a screening. Hey, I want to apply for developmental disability waiver and I'd like a screening. At no point should anyone you're talking to on the phone say, oh, no, you don't need that. You're not eligible. This isn't for you. No, you get to have your screening. So just make sure. You never know who's answering that phone and what they may or may not know on the other end. So just know you do have a right to screening. No one can deny that of you. So you get your chance to go in, bring any information you have to that screening. And then once you are put on the wait list, because to be eligible for a waiver, you have to have a disability and you have to meet the Medicaid asset requirements where it's under 2,000, and that's your asset. So you as an adult, if you're working, we need to look at your monthly, that your monthly income is under 2,000. But if you are, you know, a child, it's still based on your income. So the child is not going to lose their eligibility because mom and dad have a high income or any income. It's based on the income. And again, this is where it's called a Medicaid waiver, because it's waiving some of those traditional requirements for Medicaid. So you're eligible if you have a disability and you need support. Once you are found eligible, they're going to give you a priority number. A priority one is you need this waiver now, like you need it really, really quickly. Unfortunately, because Virginia has a wait list, now means a year, maybe 2 years. Priority two is, yeah, you need it pretty soon, but it's not a now. So it's pretty soon, like 3, 4, 5 years. I would add a few more years to that, but it's about that. And then priority three is you need it, but just not now. So it's kind of out there waiting. So once you are on that wait list, it's so important to develop that relationship with your caseworker. And Holly was just talking about this as well. You want your case manager to know your name. You want them to know about your loved one with a disability. You want to update them. I update my case manager. I send her an email. Hey, we just changed Ethan's medication. Hey, Ethan's going to be going to 6th grade at this school. And I keep her informed all the time about what's going on. Don't forget about Ethan. So as the advocate, that's the kind of work that I have to do. Waivers can come into play with employment. So I just want to talk briefly about 3 examples. I am mindful of the time. If someone is not getting enough support or support through DARS or through the school for employment, you can talk to the case manager of your waiver, if you actually have a waiver, not on the wait list, but you actually have the waiver, about some supported employment. 3 things you can get. So supported employment services, and I kind of listed, they're very similar to what Ms. Jackson was talking about. Assessment, planning, job development, on the job training, those great things. You can also get workplace support. So these are supplemental job coaching services. Again, I have a client right now that we are talking with the job coaching agency and also with the CSB, his case manager, because he has the Medicaid waiver, about utilizing this for his workplace support. And that's really exciting. So this is an option. And whoops, sorry, I didn't put this on here, but some individuals who have the waiver may want to own their own company, right? Do their own kind of work, sell something that they're making, or provide some sort of a service. So someone with a disability who is self-employed can use personal assistance, which is a service under the Medicaid waiver, to support them on the job. And let me clarify, not to do the job for them or to be one of the employees, but to maybe help them package something into a box, maybe help them take an order, maybe help them deliver something. So those are the kinds of services that the waiver could provide for someone who's also self-employed. So there's some really great options there. Again, if the more traditional DARS in school is not available for some reason. So thank you again. There's my contact information and that QR code again, if you'd like to sign up for the free clinic. And I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. I was just cheering you on, especially when you were talking about no one's going to be upset if you get to the front of the line and you no longer need the services. People get tired of hearing me say, prepare for transition in 2 steps. First, you fill your toolbox, then you decide what tool you need.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, I think all 4 of us have worked in this field long enough to have seen families who have been in a really good position, but then life has a way of throwing us for a curve, and they reach for a tool and their toolbox is empty. And that is a really, really difficult situation to navigate. And so I encourage you to think about that, because these are complex processes to apply for services. If it's waiver, you spoke at length about the wait times, but even working with DARS, the process of applying and processing all that paperwork and then setting up meetings and then choosing a vendor, and then that can be 6 to 12 months easily. Sure. And so when the clock is ticking towards graduation, this is why, we're kind of always pushing this a little bit to make sure we have our students on track and they have their paperwork in the pipeline. And we have a few really good questions. And if you'll just give me a moment, I'm going to try to get Judy back on camera. Kristen is back.
I was like, I'm not the person you're looking for.
Yes, you are, Kristen.
You are.
Hey, thanks, Judy.
I'm just going to multitask real quick. But we have, Kristen, if you wouldn't mind leading us through some of those really great questions that popped up in the chat. Thank you all for listening so attentively, because I saw some really, really thoughtful ones that I'm looking forward to hearing the answers to.
Yeah, while we're on waivers, I'll touch on those first. And then we had one that came back through on DARS a little bit ago that we'll circle back to. So we have, do you apply to each of these waivers separately?
No. So you're going to go to your CSB office to apply for the waivers that I talked about tonight. There is another waiver called CCC Plus that is through social services, so through a completely different office. And that is not one that I touched on tonight because I was focused a little bit more on the employment side. But that you could apply to the CCC Plus Social Services Department waiver and apply for a developmental disability waiver. You don't need both, but that has been a strategy. I don't think you need both. I don't want to tell you what you need. You could make that choice for yourself, but sometimes that has been a strategy. The CCC Plus is more available. And so often families have applied for that, see if they qualify while they're kind of waiting and sitting on this other wait list. I'm about, and that's fine, again, to Holly's point of having tools in your toolbox. But I also think that DD waiver is going to offers a lot of really robust services, and it's a much more general eligibility. You have to have a disability and you have to meet the income requirements as an individual. And so I really encourage people to get on there and really push and work with that case manager to get that unlocked for you.
And am I correct in understanding that's going to be really the key when we think about not necessarily our students when they're in their teens, 20s, or early 30s, but maybe when I'm retired and I'm maybe needing some supports myself, 20, 30, 40 years from now, who's going to be supporting my child.
That's
The
right.
DD waiver is the one who's going to have that level of support when we're in that phase of life.
That's right.
Yeah, maybe earlier, but especially then.
Mhm.
Judy, one of the questions that popped up that I skipped over before, so I apologize to the person who posted it, was, can DARS help support internships, which is a great question.
Yes, and again, it's a case by case situation. So once your student became a client, we would look at that and see how best we could support it.
And I can say that we had two students who became clients last summer, where they were interested in an internship. They had to apply for that internship. It was very competitive, separately, and they were awarded the internship. And because that internship was in line with their work goals on their IPE, their individualized plan for employment, DARS was able to support the job coaching that they needed to be successful during the internship. So they found that internship on their own. One of them was, through networking through us, and one was independent. And then they were able to come in and get those services. And so that's something to think about too, as these timelines get tangled, right? A lot of times internship deadlines can be in the late fall or very, very early winter. And we're going to be talking about summer work experiences closer to March and April. So by the time we're talking about that and trying to get vendors in place, first of all, there are only so many employment service organizations in Central Virginia. And so everyone kind of has to wait in line to make sure that there is an employment specialist or skills trainer available to work with them for that kind of experience. And that all takes time. It may be that standalone internship that is sponsored by the Federal Reserve Bank or any Dominion Power, whatever these companies are that have their summer internship programs, their timelines are going to march on no matter what's happening with the service provision pipeline. So that's where we get a little bit, it's important to have that relationship with someone who is working on that case and also advocating for you, so you can think about those kinds of things that can tangle you up, can kind of trip you up while you're in that process. So thinking ahead. And then, DARS can work on work-based experiences, which may look like an internship, but that doesn't necessarily replace like a competitive internship that could be available through an established business. And then we had a follow-up question about trying to get a summer experience and thinking about location. I really am excited that this family is thinking in this kind of a detailed way about how we can have initial work experiences. And I think to address this, we'll probably have to have an individual family meeting so we can dig in, because the devil's always in the details. But I would just say, I've been doing this for 22 years. And one of the most difficult things for our young folks is getting that first employment experience. So many teenagers do that. They get the first job flipping burgers, being out in the workforce and just learning basic things like how to do a job when it gets boring, and how to follow directions when you don't like your supervisor's tone, and how to wear a uniform where you're not sure if you like the way it makes your body look. But all those basic things that we all have to do as a part of the working world, it can be tough sometimes for our students to access those because they might have a more complex need for support, but really they're the same place their peers are in terms of needing that first experience. So these summer work experiences can be a great way to both explore their career experiences and also to have that first work experience where they're learning those workplace skills, showing up on time, being patient, taking a deep breath and counting to 10 when you need to, all of those kinds of things. Well, I'm just going to look at the chat and make sure I haven't forgotten anybody.
We just had one more follow-up question about waivers, which is a great question. If you do get a waiver, does it transfer if you move to another state?
No, it doesn't, which is so unfortunate. And I hope that we can work toward a solution with that, because it's really not fair at all. Now, I will say, I have a family right now that's moving from Hawaii to Missouri. And so I've been working with Missouri about what we can do to kind of get them in and ready and as quickly as possible. And Missouri is kind of a bad example because they are a no wait list state. But they are, we're sending all the documents, the current support plan, the services plan, we're sending all of that stuff. So I would say if you have to move and your kiddo has a waiver or is on a wait list, do everything you can to try and prep where you're moving the CSB or whatever the local administrator there is, and get them all the information they need so that you can hit the ground running. But unless you're moving to a no wait list state, you're going to end up starting all over, and it's really unfortunate. There are some states too, I believe, I don't want to be incorrect, it may be Colorado, that have a clawback as well if you leave, meaning that they want their money back that they've provided to pay. Now, I can't be sure that it's Colorado, but there are some states that have a clawback as well if you've used their Medicaid services. So unfortunately, and that's a huge, to me, a human rights issue that we have to address. And unfortunately, I can't do that, but it is good to be informed and take those moves very seriously.
And kind of a follow-up question to that, if an individual is living between two households and they're in two different states, would they have a waiver in both states, or can you only have a waiver in one of those states? How would that?
That's a good one. I don't know that one, but I do know that residency is required. So I would need to look at the definition that that state has and that CSB has for residency. But I think it's unlikely that they could have two waivers. Very, very doubtful. I will be surprised if you can. And I think it's going to depend on really where their residence is.
Yeah,
But
I would think that that would probably track with other similar laws, like you can't be enrolled in two school districts, right?
yeah.
You aren't required to pay property taxes, and well,
Right.
Yeah,
a little
Sure.
bit different.
I think the only public benefit that doesn't matter is certainly Social Security, because that's completely federal. But yeah, but everything else, yeah, it's their residency requirements.
And I would add that we had the situation come up last year where we had a student who did a great job and was enrolled in VR services here in Virginia, and then he has a plan to go to college in a different state, as many young people do, and wants to have some work experiences while in that other state. DARS is a state agency, and so that case will need to transfer. Now, there's not the same kind of eligibility backup for supported employment services that there are for waiver services. So that's good news, but there is going to need to be a process of transferring that case from Virginia to this other state, so that if that student wants to access services while at college. And what does he do on summer breaks? I'm not sure. I think those offices would have to work together to make that happen. But that is one of the things that can be a challenge about this, is we don't live in a perfect system. And so we do have to be savvy moving forward and making sure we're asking questions and moving forward strategically.
Holly, if I might, one thing that has occurred to me. So, I talked a lot about pre-eds, and I talked a lot about, what the schools and DARS. And so I'm reminded, I had students that were students of Holly's and Kristen's last year that were my students for pre-eds, but for VR, they belong to another office. So that could happen again. So don't be surprised if you have a counselor like myself that's providing pre-ed services, those 5 components that we talked about: work-based learning, workplace readiness, self-advocacy, job readiness, all those things. Don't be surprised if somebody's offering those things, and then you have a VR counselor talking to you about other things as well from a different, in most cases, we like to try to keep it so that whomever is the counselor for pre-eds is also the counselor for VR, but sometimes you'll have 2. So I just don't want you to be alarmed.
And I know we have some families who go directly to DARS and they have open cases, and if that does not cross Judy's desk, then we here have no way of knowing about it. So the other thing I would say is, make sure you share that with us. Sometimes when students come from other schools, they've already been signed up for pre-eds at that other school, but we'll need a release so that we can coordinate. And really the only intention in doing that is to make sure that we're in conversation with you about where you are in the process. How can we help you? Is there information where we can keep you up to date and make sure we're on point? If you've got it covered, we're happy. that's not a problem. But it helps us to know that you have it covered. So I can stop sending you emails asking you to fill out forms for me. Moving forward. I got another really, really good question from a person, and I'm gonna have to, I actually don't know the answer. So I'm gonna respond. If you're that person, I'm going to respond to that email by email, and we'll need to set up a time to try and find a resource who can address that question. So thank you for posting it. All right, I think we've addressed some of the specific questions. So if you are streaming this at a later date and you're saying, gosh, I missed the clinics at Northstar because they've already passed because I'm watching the recording, never fear. Dr. Matthews is still available. You have her email, so please feel free to reach out. Ms. Jackson is still here working with us. And of course, both Ms. Person and I are available. You'll have our contact information. Please feel free to reach out and ask any questions. And thank you for joining us. And we're going to call that the end of